Hi, I'm Marla. My parents called me a disgrace in front of everyone at my own birthday dinner. But that night, that wasn't the beginning. It was the moment everything they'd buried for years finally surfaced. Every insult, every lie, every time they made me feel like I didn't belong. They thought I'd stay quiet. They were wrong. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it right now? Drop it in the comments. Let's see who else understands that sometimes family cuts deeper than strangers ever could. I knew something was off the moment I walked in. Not because the lighting was too dim or the staff was out of sync. This was my restaurant, after all. It was the way the air felt thick with performance. The kind of curated celebration people plan not for joy, but for appearances. My heels clicked softly against the polished concrete of Marla and Co. Yes, my name was on the door, yet the hostess barely made eye contact before leading me in. No warm welcome, no flowers in sight, just a stiff nod and a rehearsed smile. She didn't even know it was my birthday. Apparently, no one had told her who the guest of honor was. The moment I turned the corner into the private dining area, the noise of clinking glasses and polite laughter hit like a stage scene. There they were, my family, already halfway through cocktails. No one stood up. No one clapped. No happy birthday. Not even a balloon. "Glad you could make it," my father muttered, barely glancing up from his bourbon. He didn't hug me. Calvin Monroe never hugged unless a camera was present. My mother, Gwen, reached to adjust a strand of her hair as if I'd interrupted something critical in her grooming ritual. "You look well. You've put on some weight, haven't you?" She said it with a smile so polished it could have cut glass. I gave her a nod, not even pretending to smile back. "You look the same, Mom." Then there was Dexter, my older brother, the golden boy. He stood when I arrived, but only to pull Kendra's chair out so she could scoot closer to him. Kendra didn't even greet me. She sipped her wine and went right back to her story about some disastrous board meeting, which apparently ended with her being right. Again, I scanned the table. Everyone was dressed like they were attending a gala. And yet somehow, I'd been the only one not told the dress code. They wore black tie. I wore navy slacks and a button-up blouse. It was business casual, not birthday celebratory. And then I saw the seating chart, a small, handwritten card in front of each place, setting Dexter, Kendra, Mom, Dad, Aunt Bernice, Uncle Howard, and mine, Marla, tucked all the way at the end, right next to the swinging kitchen door. Every time it opened, I caught a gust of garlic and dish soap. I sat down quietly. No one adjusted for me, not even Gwen. She barely moved her purse. "So," Aunt Bernice said in that voice people use when they're about to insult you with a question, "you're still running that little restaurant, right?" "Still single." I gave her a sharp look. "Still building an empire." She blinked, confused, then gave a tight chuckle. "Of course, dear. Good for you." I tuned out after that. The sounds around me blurred into background static. The clinking, the murmurs, the constant reminder that this dinner wasn't about me. It was about putting on a show. Calvin, Gwen, Dexter. They didn't book this table to honor me. They booked it to be seen. What stung wasn't that they were faking it. It was that they didn't even try to hide the fact that I wasn't part of the center. Not physically, not emotionally. I looked down the table and saw my mother pull out her phone to show a guest photos of Dexter speaking at a finance conference in Denver. "They flew him in just for the panel," she said proudly. "Such a brilliant mind. Always has been." I remember birthdays growing up. They were always shared. Not because we were close, but because it was convenient. Dexter's birthday was 3 days before mine, and my parents never saw the point of doing 2 parties. 1 cake, 2 names scribbled on it. His name always came first. His candles were always lit first. I had told myself that this year would be different, that I had earned it. Finally, after years of bootstrapping my way up from line cook to owner of one of Seattle's top-reviewed restaurants, I thought I had arrived, but here I was. Again. At a table full of relatives who still treated me like a side character in Dexter's movie. Like the waitress who hadn't quite made it out of the back office. I sipped my water. It tasted like tap even though I knew we served filtered. I wasn't angry, not yet, but something in me hardened. These people didn't deserve the version of me they kept trying to shrink. A young server approached to refill my glass. He hesitated a moment, perhaps recognizing me. I gave him the faintest shake of my head. Not here. Not yet. And then, like clockwork, the moment came. Kendra leaned in her smile, thin and weaponized. "Since you're already dressed for work," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Do you mind helping pour the wine?" Laughter erupted around the table. I didn't laugh. I smiled and reached for the bottle. Because if they thought this was humiliation, they had no idea what was coming. I could feel the weight of the wine bottle in my hand. My grip didn't shake, but something inside me did. It was subtle quiet, like the air had shifted around my shoulders. Kendra's voice still hung in the space like cheap perfume, cloying and impossible to ignore. Everyone at the table chuckled. Some politely, some too loud. But no one, not one of them, said a word in my defense. My father let out a dry laugh, lifting his glass lazily. "Well, at least she's working," he said, eyes still fixed on the rim of his drink. "That's more than I can say for some kids these days." Gwen offered no correction, no apology. She just waved a dismissive hand and murmured, "Kendra didn't mean anything by it. Don't be so sensitive." I took a slow breath and forced a smile as I poured the Chardonnay down the line of glasses. Steady, precise. I moved from person to person like I was back on my first week of training at a 5-star hotel in Manhattan before I knew how to hold power in a room. But I wasn't that version of myself anymore. This was my space, my restaurant, my wine. Yet none of them saw it. Or worse, they chose not to. "Still single, dear?" my aunt asked sweetly as I poured for her. "That's all right. You always were the independent one." She leaned in like she was sharing a secret. "Your brother always said you were more career-focused, but there's still time." "Bless your heart," another relative added. "Running around restaurants and staying busy? At least you're not asking anyone to split the check." That got more laughter. Uncle Howard patted his stomach and said she'll have the whole kitchen running laps tonight. They laughed louder this time. I didn't. I turned to Gwen, just hoping for even a glance that told me she knew this had gone too far. But she was busy passing her phone down the table. "Dexter just got promoted again?" She beamed. "Look, here he is giving a talk at the Pacific West Finance Summit. Front row seats, keynote speaker. His name's in Forbes this quarter." The screen flashed as the photo moved from hand to hand. People wowed, nodded, murmured impressive, and he's going places. No one looked at me. I placed the wine bottle back on the side table and sat down slowly. They had left no space for me, so I sat on the far edge next to the wall sconce that flickered every few seconds. Calvin took another sip and leaned back. His tone turned reflective, as if he were genuinely pondering something heavy. "Honestly, I don't know how we ended up with 2 kids on opposite sides of the spectrum," he said, voice steady but cold. "One's got a real career, an office, a reputation." He let the silence sit for a moment before finishing. "The other's still serving food." It landed like a slap, but he didn't even blink, didn't look at me. They were doing it again, not just dismissing me, but actively writing me out of the narrative, like I was the family's failed experiment, a story to be pitied. I felt the air leave my lungs, not from sadness, but from sheer restraint. My nails pressed into my palm beneath the table. I could have flipped the table. I could have screamed, but I didn't. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, my mind drifted not to rage, but to memory. I remembered the day I left my job in finance. I was 28. I had a stable salary, a decent apartment, a predictable life. I told Calvin I wanted to open a restaurant, not just run one, but build it. His reaction? Laughter. Full body head thrown back amusement. You in the kitchen. That's rich, he said. Stick to numbers, Marla. That's what you're good at. Gwen had cried, but not out of fear for my future, out of embarrassment. We didn't raise you to chase flavors, Marla, she'd whispered. We gave you structure. And Dexter? He had smiled, patted me on the shoulder, and said the one thing that rang louder in my ears tonight than anything else. You're brave, but you'll be broke in a year. Well, here we were 6 years later, and somehow they still thought I hadn't made it. Back at the table, Gwen was already talking about Dexter's lake house. Calvin added something about a smart investment and real assets. I barely heard them anymore. Their voices blurred into background static. I picked up my water glass, took a long sip, set it down. Then I looked directly at my father. I'm not a waitress, I said quietly, firmly. He finally turned his eyes to me, cold-measured. No, he asked, his lip curling just slightly. Then what exactly are you? Because all I see is wasted potential. I didn't flinch, but something inside me snapped. And just when they thought they'd humiliated me enough, someone from the kitchen said a name none of them expected. My jaw didn't tighten. My fists didn't clench. I didn't flinch or cry or storm out. I just went still. The kind of stillness that comes after a storm has passed through and left everything flattened. I sat there, my back straight, hands folded gently on my lap, as if I were watching a stranger's humiliation, not living through it. But deep down, the foundation was shifting. I'd spent years building walls to keep their judgment out, only to realize they never needed to knock. They walked right through like they owned the place. I heard the clinking of a fork against a plate. Gwen murmuring something about Dexter's newest partnership with some consulting firm. Kendra nodding like a bobblehead. Calvin swirling his wine like he'd just delivered a eulogy. And then a sound behind me, not dramatic, just awkward. The young server Ryan, if I remembered correctly, tripped slightly over the corner of the rug. The bread basket in his hand tilted, sending 2 rolls flying onto Calvin's plate, and a dark splash of red wine arcing over his starched white cuff. Gasps. Calvin stood abruptly, jerking his arm away. Seriously, Ryan stammered. Oh God, I'm so sorry, sir, ma'am. I mean, boss, I didn't. Oh God, there it was. Boss. The room stilled. Forks paused midair. Laughter stopped. Even the hum of the restaurant seemed to hush, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Calvin turned slowly, his cuff dripping. His eyes locked onto Ryan's, then darted almost unwillingly to me. I didn't move. Another server, Lisa, rushed over with a cloth and began apologizing profusely. Chef M's gonna lose it if she hears we messed up table 12. Then she stopped, looked up. Her face paled. Her eyes flicked to me. Too late. Kendra's brows furrowed. Wait, she said a little too loud. Did he just call you boss, Lisa, poor thing? Froze like a rabbit in a spotlight? She tried. Then her voice dropped to a whisper. Oh no. Dexter turned his head toward me, really looked at me for the first time that night. Not through me, not past me. At me. His smile had faded. His glass hung in midair, forgotten. Calvin cleared his throat. You're the... What now? I reached slowly for the napkins, handed one to Ryan without a word, then turned to Calvin and dabbed gently at his sleeve. You should have ordered white wine, I said, my voice calm. It's easier to lift from linen. The air around the table turned dense. Kendra blinked, looked at Gwen. Is this a joke? Gwen didn't answer. Her phone was still in her hand, but now she was staring at it like it might tell her what to do. Lisa stepped back silently. Ryan followed. They both disappeared toward the kitchen, leaving a hollow hush in their wake. I leaned back in my seat and folded my hands again, gaze slowly drifting from face to face. Let them sit in it. Let them wonder. I didn't know them clarity. Not yet. The thing about power is it doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it creeps in beneath the surface, quiet, steady, unshakable. For the first time all evening, I felt tall, taller than Dexter's CEO titles, taller than Gwen's curated elegance, taller than Calvin's judgment. They had spent the night cutting me down, and still here, I sat untouched, unbothered. The silence dragged long enough to be awkward, then long enough to be uncomfortable. I didn't speak, neither did they. Even Dexter looked like he wanted to ask something, but couldn't form the words. And then, without warning, the front doors opened. A gust of cool night air followed the sound of polished shoes on hardwood. Footsteps slow, measured confident. I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. I recognized the weight of his presence before I heard the voice. "Apologies for the delay," he said. Traffic was a nightmare. Calvin's face shifted. Recognition, confusion, and something else. Unease. Dexter sat straighter. Gwen blinked rapidly, trying to piece together a social cue she hadn't been prepped for. I turned my head slightly enough to greet the man now stepping toward our table. "Mr. Graham," I said with a soft smile. "Right on time." The moment Mr. Graham extended his hand to me, everything they thought they knew collapsed in silence. He didn't hesitate. While the rest of them looked like they were choking on confusion, Auguste Leclerc walked in like the room was his, but he handed it to me the moment he spoke. "Marla," he said, voice smooth, but sure. "Sorry I'm late. The board meeting ran long. You look incredible, by the way." I stood as he reached me. His handshake was firm, equal. No airs, no false charm, just respect. The kind that doesn't need to be announced because it already walks ahead of you. Dexter immediately straightened in his seat, tugging at his tie. Kendra blinked and tucked a stray hair behind her ear. Gwen set her fork down, her movement suddenly delicate and controlled. Calvin watched, expression unreadable, like a man who just realized he'd walked into someone else's office without knocking. August's smile never faltered. "I just tried the new truffle glaze you tested on that duck entree." "Marla, I'm serious. That was brilliant." "You've outdone yourself." He said it like no one else was in the room, like it was just us two equals in the middle of a professional celebration. But they heard every word loud and clear. The air changed. Dexter looked at me again, but this time there was no smirk, just confusion. Kendra blinked too quickly, and Gwen's posture stiffened like she'd swallowed something sharp. "Wait," Calvin finally said. "You two know each other?" August turned his gaze to him, calm, almost amused. "We work together." "She's my business partner, one of the most intuitive operators I've ever met." Silence. Not a dramatic kind. Not gasping or flustered. Just the kind that sticks in the throat and makes you chew slower, think harder, and suddenly question every assumption you ever made about someone. No one said anything. For the first time that night, I felt the table shrink. Not because I was small, but because they finally saw how big I'd become. August glanced around. "Hope I'm not interrupting a family thing." I smiled politely. "Not at all. It's been enlightening." He chuckled, understanding more than I said. "Good. I won't stay long. Just wanted to drop in, confirm we're still locked for Napa next week. Then without missing a beat." "And Marla..." Seriously, that truffle finish Michelin won't know what hit them. I caught the slight twitch in Dexter's jaw. The way Gwen looked toward Calvin as if waiting for him to rescue the conversation. But none of them had anything to say. And that said everything. August turned, slightly gave a polite nod to the rest of the table. "Lovely meeting everyone?" He added no titles, no names, just a professional courtesy. As he stepped away, I sat back down, slowly still facing them. "You're expanding," Kendra asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "To Napa?" I nodded. "Yes. Our fourth location." Gwen blinked. Fourth Dexter tilted forward. "Hold on. You're opening restaurants," I didn't answer. I didn't have to. August already had. For years, I had clawed for a place at this table, hoping one of them would see me, hear me, validate me. But in a few sentences, a man they respected more than themselves had done what they refused to. Acknowledged that I'd built something they couldn't even imagine. And not for their approval. Not anymore. I didn't need their applause. I didn't even need their understanding. Because finally, the balance had shifted. I wasn't the one reaching anymore. They were. It was in the way Kendra fidgeted with her necklace. The way Gwen's fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. The way Calvin suddenly looked down like the floor had become more important than whatever he'd planned to say next. I breathed in slowly. It didn't feel like vindication. It felt like clarity. This wasn't a gotcha moment. It was a mirror. And for once, they were forced to look into it. As August exited the room, pausing just long enough to wink at the server who had spilled the wine earlier, Dexter finally broke the silence. "Wait," he said, the word sticky in his throat. "You own this place?" I turned to face him fully. And for the first time in my life, I didn't shrink when he looked at me. Dexter let out a chuckle, tight, almost plastic. "You've been holding out on us, huh?" He said it like we were in on some private joke. But his eyes weren't laughing. Gwen followed, voice pitched just high enough to sound maternal. "You must be doing well, sweetie. I mean, this place, it's stunning. Absolutely beautiful. We always said you had good taste." Calvin still hadn't spoken. He just swirled his wine, staring into the glass, like he was trying to drown in it. Then Kendra, ever the opportunist, leaned in with that bright pageant smile. "We always knew you'd do something special. We just didn't realize it'd be this big." Her hand brushed my arm like we were sisters at a brunch table. "Honestly, Marla, this is impressive and inspiring." I nodded slowly, offering the kind of polite smile you give a stranger on a subway. Nothing more. The shift in the air was unmistakable. They weren't stunned anymore. They were adjusting, recalculating. Dexter sat up straighter. "You know, I've got some big clients coming into town next quarter. Might be cool to host them here. Monthly dinners even. Great exposure for your brand." My brand, Gwen, chimed in like they'd rehearsed it. "Your father and I are thinking about renewing our vows next spring. Wouldn't it be lovely to do it right here? Family food, and maybe a little owner's discount?" She laughed gently, tapping her pearls like punctuation. I sipped my water. Then Kendra, swift as ever, pulled out her phone. "Let's take a selfie. You look amazing tonight. I want to post how proud I am of you. #FamilyEmpire. She angled the camera before I could even respond. Click. It was done. She didn't even ask if I wanted to be part of the narrative. I was already uploaded. I exhaled through my nose and gently, slowly pulled my arm from her grasp. My smile never faltered, but it cooled, sharpened. This isn't pride, I thought. It's positioning. They didn't care about who I had become. They cared about what they could extract from who I had become. I folded my hands in my lap, letting the pause stretch. And then I said evenly, "If you're here to enjoy dinner, please enjoy dinner. If you're here for business, email my assistant." Gwen blinked. Dexter's mouth opened, then closed. Kendra shifted in her seat, clutching her phone tighter, like it might offer her a line to escape. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult them. But the line had been drawn, and they felt it. Their energy softened like air slowly deflating from a balloon. Calvin finally looked up. His eyes met mine, and for once, they didn't hold judgment. They held something harder to face. "Respect. Unearned and too late. Come on," Marla, Dexter said, trying for casual but missing by a mile. Don't be like that. We're family. Family! The word felt foreign in his mouth, like he hadn't earned the right to use it. I tilted my head and asked, "Since when?" The silence returned deeper this time. He didn't answer. None of them did, because they knew. This wasn't about dinner anymore. This wasn't about forgiveness. This was about leverage, and mine no longer belonged to them. And just when they thought I was finished drawing lines, Calvin made a request that crossed every one of them. Dexter laughed again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Come on, Marla. You know we were just joking earlier." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The weight of the hour before was still heavy in the air. I could feel their nervous smiles stretch across the table like cheap tape trying to patch a sinking boat. Kendra leaned in, voice dipped in false cheer. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Let's just enjoy the night." "That's what birthdays are for, right?" Gwen placed her hand over mine gently. "Let's not let old feelings ruin what could be a new start. It's been a beautiful evening. Let's keep it that way." Then came the voice I expected, the one I was always prepared for. Calvin didn't look at me when he spoke. He sipped his wine and muttered just loud enough for the table to hear, "I'm sure you won't charge us. After all, we raised you." I stood slowly, letting the silence stretch. No one moved. Even the server paused near the edge, the room waiting. "That's the thing," I said evenly, my eyes locked on his. "You raised someone. I'm just not sure it was me." It landed like a stone, dropped into still water, soft, but rippling all the way to the edges. I turned to the manager by the door. "Please prepare the full bill for this private room. Every course, every drink, no discounts." The entire table fell quiet. Forks hovered midair. Gwen gasped softly like she'd just swallowed something bitter. "You'd really charge your own family?" she asked, as if I were the one being unreasonable. Calvin placed his fork down deliberately, like it was a gavel. "If that's what success has done to you, turned you cold and transactional, then I feel sorry for you." I looked at him, really looked at him. The same man who once told me no man would marry a woman who smelled like garlic and ambition. The man who called my dream a joke and my passion a waste of time. "You feel sorry for me?" I asked, my voice low, but unwavering. "You're the one who called me a disgrace. You're the one who laughed when you thought I was just the help. You're the one who said, 'What was it, that you didn't have a daughter like me?'" No one answered. And now I continued, "Now that you've realized who I actually am, you're reaching for the title you already threw away. Family." The audacity was stunning, but no longer surprising. I turned back to the staff. "When they're finished, bring the check to me personally." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even raise my voice. I just walked out. And with each step away from that table, I felt lighter. Not because they'd hurt me again, but because this time, I wasn't trying to prove anything. Not worth, not success, not identity. They'd seen it for themselves, and they were uncomfortable with what they saw. For once, that discomfort wasn't mine to carry. I reached the hallway just outside the dining room, paused near the host's stand. The soft hum of music drifted in from the lounge, where guests were laughing over cocktails and conversation. In that space away from the tension and performance, I felt whole again. And then, as if scripted, Calvin's voice floated faintly behind me. "Let her go," he muttered. "She won't last without us." I closed my eyes for a second, not from pain, but to stop myself from laughing. Because what he didn't understand, what none of them ever had, was this. I didn't build my life to survive them. I built it to live beyond them. But as I turned the corner toward my office, a staff member ran up with something in his hand. And it wasn't the bill. Ryan was waiting by the hallway, his face tight with something between anger and concern. He didn't waste a second. "Marla," he said, holding out his phone. "They've already started posting." I took the device expecting maybe a blurry group photo or some snide caption under that forced family selfie. But what I saw punched the air right out of my lungs. Kendra had posted it. A filtered snapshot of the two of us side by side, her smile wide mine barely there. The caption read, "Success is hard to handle for some people. Family should be a safe place, not a battlefield." Comments were already rolling in. We saw the tension. "Poor Dexter. Some people forget where they come from. Can't believe she treated you like that." My phone buzzed in my bag. Then again and again, notifications stacking. A message popped up from Uncle Troy. "You embarrassed your whole family, classless Marla." Classless. That word echoed, loud, bitter, familiar. They were rewriting the story. And this time, they were painting me as the villain. I handed Ryan back the phone, turned on my heel, and made my way to my office. I didn't slam the door when I entered. I didn't throw anything. But the air inside that room changed the second I stepped in. I locked it behind me and walked straight to the small desk tucked in the corner. My laptop blinked awake as I slid into the chair. "They don't get to rewrite this," I whispered aloud. I pulled up the security system, the dining room audio on. I clicked through every recorded angle of the evening. Calvin calling me a disgrace. Gwen showing off Dexter's photo. Kendra's selfie ambush. My refusal to comp the meal. Calvin's comment about raising someone. Just not you. It was all there. Every sneer. Every fake smile. Every humiliating jab wrapped in forced laughter. I drafted a message. Quick, efficient, attached a clip, added a timestamp. Then I called Sam, my assistant. "Hi, yes, I need you to send something to August. Right now. Flag it as confidential and urgent, and make sure the timestamp's highlighted in the subject line." Understood. He didn't ask questions. He knew better. When I hung up, I opened my own social media app, the same one Kendra had weaponized hours earlier. I didn't post anything vengeful. No call-outs. No names, just a photo, a simple one. Me standing outside the first Marla and Company location. My hair tied back apron slightly stained from a long day, arms folded chin high. The caption was short. "Some wounds turn into walls, some into doorways." I know which one mine became. I turned off comments, then turned off the phone. I sat back in the chair and closed my eyes. For a moment, I wasn't 35. I was 24 again. Sitting in that same chair on the night we signed the lease for our first space. I had cried back then, not because I was afraid, but because I finally had something that was mine. Something no one in my family could touch, judge, or ruin. I wasn't going to let them start now. A knock came at the door. "Marla." It was Ryan again. His voice was lower now. "Just thought you should know." The table left, quietly. "But your mom?" "She asked me for your office line." I nodded once. "Thanks, Ryan. Lock up the floor." He disappeared down the hallway. I waited for the silence to return. And just as I reached for my bag, my phone lit up again. Voicemail. "Mom, 1 minute 43 seconds. I stared at it, then hit play. Her voice cracked halfway through the message, but it wasn't sorrow I heard. It was fear. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone still in my hand, Gwen's voicemail playing again in my head. Her voice was sugar-coated, almost sing-song, like she was inviting me to a tea party and not issuing a final test. "Next week is my birthday. Come home. Everyone's hoping you'll be there." That was it. No mention of the dinner. No acknowledgement of what happened. No apology. Just expectation. Minutes after I listened to it, Calvin's text came through. "Your mother's been through a lot. Don't disappoint her. Not we've thought about what we said. Not we're sorry. Just more manipulation hidden behind sentiment. It used to work. It used to pull me back. Not anymore. I turned off the lamp beside me and stared at the city lights through the window. Seattle pulsed gently below, indifferent to my pain, but comforting in its own way. The hum of traffic reminded me that life went on with or without their approval. There was a time when a birthday invitation would have felt like hope. Now, it felt like bait. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. Just hollow. Like a room finally emptied of all the furniture that never fit. I walked over to the drawer where I kept things I wasn't ready to toss. The kind of items that once mattered. Cards, receipts, photos. The box was small, matte black, and neatly labeled Then. Tonight, I added something to it. A printed photo of me standing between my two co-founders' arms linked all of us laughing in front of our flagship location. We'd just signed the deal for our third Marla & Company site in Austin. That moment was pure. Next, I printed a duplicate of the restaurant receipt from the night of the dinner. I highlighted the total. $342.68, not including tip. I didn't comp a single item, not out of spite, but because it was mine to give. Or not. Then I pulled out a blank card. On the front was a watercolor drawing of rosemary. Subtle, elegant, the herb of remembrance. I wrote, I stopped being your daughter 6 years ago. This is my last gift. I hope you'll cherish it. I slipped the photo, the receipt, and the card into an ivory envelope, sealed it with wax. Not because I thought it mattered to them, but because it mattered to me. Closure like success deserves ceremony. I dropped it off at the post counter the next morning, opting for overnight delivery. The clerk smiled at me, complimented my blazer, and asked if it was a gift. Something like that, I replied. When I returned to the restaurant, the air felt lighter. My assistant Sam approached as I stepped inside. There's still no RSVP to that birthday invite, he said carefully. Want me to forward it to August, just in case you change your mind? I shook my head. No, some doors aren't meant to stay open. He nodded, and for the first time in a long time, that answer felt final. I went to my office, cleared a few client emails, and took a quiet moment just to breathe. Not because everything was perfect, but because the war was over, and I had walked away with everything I'd built intact, including myself. Later that afternoon, I grabbed coffee with Jasmine, one of my co-founders. She was the only person who knew every piece of the dinner story. I showed her the envelope. She didn't ask questions, just gave me that kind of hug that says you did the hard thing. When I got home that night, I threw away my mother's voicemail. Blocked both her number and Calvin's, not out of hate, but because healing sometimes requires silence. The next 2 weeks passed quietly. The restaurant was busy. Our Napa expansion was on track. I smiled more easily, laughed at things that didn't hurt. But the past has claws, and sometimes it dials. Marla, one of our new hosts, called out from the reservation desk one evening. Your brother's been calling? He's left 3 messages. You want me to block him? I didn't answer right away, because even when you've closed the door, some knocks still sound familiar. No, I said. Let him speak. I want to hear what he thinks is left to save. The screen dimmed, the call went to voicemail, and I let it. No swipe, no response, no second thoughts. Instead, I walked to the window, leaned against the glass, and watched the streetlights flicker into evening. The city was still moving. People were still laughing outside cafes, clinking glasses, living lives untouched by my family's chaos. And that's when it truly settled in. I didn't owe Dexter anything. Not a call, not closure, not even a goodbye. The message sat in my inbox untouched. It joined the growing pile of digital noise that didn't deserve a second of my peace. Still, the fallout didn't wait for permission to begin. By the end of the week, Sam mentioned that Dexter had stopped by twice. Never left a message at the front. never asked to speak directly, just hovered in the lobby like someone unsure if they were welcome. They weren't. It wasn't about punishment. It wasn't revenge. I had simply stopped playing the role. I wasn't the daughter begging for approval. I wasn't the sister hoping for validation. I was just done. The same relatives who once rushed to judgment who had chimed in under Kendra's post, called me cold, accused me of being bitter and prideful, began to trickle into my inbox with a different tone. One wrote, "I didn't know it was like that. I'm sorry." Another said, "Your mom made it sound different." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I didn't need to defend the truth. I was the truth, and it had been recorded, stamped, and delivered. Silence now was power and peace. Across the city, the dominoes quietly toppled. Dexter's company received a message from August's legal team. Due to unresolved internal family conflict compromising brand integrity, all collaborative projects are paused until further notice. Kendra's post vanished from every platform. No apology, no correction, just digital amnesia as if it had never happened. Calvin returned the envelope I sent. The photo, the receipt, the card. All of it was untouched, stuffed into a shipping envelope with no return address. The only addition was Gwen's necklace, the one she wore at my birthday, left in a velvet pouch. No note, just silence. But silence can say everything. I tucked the pouch into the back of my drawer, not as a keepsake. As a reminder, some people would rather erase the truth than face it. A year passed. Spring in Napa smelled different, fresher, fuller, less like endings and more like growth. Marla and Company opened its 4th location just north of the valley. Dorian flew in. Isolde drove down from Portland. We cut the ribbon in front of a packed garden patio beneath white linen tents and soft string lights that swayed in the breeze. The first dish served was the truffle-glazed duck, the same one I'd tested alone in my 1-bedroom apartment back when I'd used grocery store mushrooms and prayed no one would notice. Now that dish had its own line on a menu printed on embossed cardstock under a section titled Foundations. After the last guest left, I stepped outside onto the patio, wineglass in hand. The lights buzzed gently above, and my heels clicked softly across the stone as I made my way to the farthest table, the one under the olive tree I'd picked out months before. I sat down, not to think, not to replay anything, just to exist. And in that quiet, I realized something I hadn't expected. I didn't want them to suffer. I didn't need them to apologize. I didn't even wish they'd change. All I wanted truly was what I had now. A life built on truth, not tolerance. A name I'd earned. A table where I belonged. Family, I had learned, isn't who claps when you win. It's who still sees your worth when you're lost. And if you don't have that, you build it. You become it. Because sometimes the most radical act of love isn't reconciliation. It's release. I lifted my glass toward the stars, and here's to letting go. And this time, it didn't hurt. Sometimes the hardest part isn't walking away. It's realizing you were never truly seen to begin with. Marla's story reminds us that silence can be more powerful than shouting, and letting go is sometimes the most loving thing you can do. For yourself. What about you? Have you ever had to choose peace over family? If this story moved, you don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real emotional stories just like this. Your support means everything, and there's so much more to come.